Well, hello. Welcome to Wall Street Hackers, one of the most popular shows on the Pod TV network, which you can see in nearly 200 countries, and of course on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube. And if you have Roku, you can see us on the Roku channel. Just type in Pod TV and you'll see all of our shows. And with that, we're going to bring in the hacker himself from Wall Street Hackers, who actually has a bachelor's degree from UCLA, also a law degree from the University of Miami, and an MBA from NYU, spending over 17 years on Wall Street and living in the New York City area. We'll bring in another other than Peter Bennett. Peter Bennett, welcome to your show.
Oh, hey, Nick. Hey, everybody. So we were off for a week, but we're back. And you can catch a new Wall Street Hackers most weeks, Thursdays or Saturdays, depending on your distribution channel. So we always start with the markets, and I'll start with a quote attributed to Yogi Berra is, quote, "It is difficult to make predictions, especially about the future." And I think this is especially apropos for our show, because in our panel discussion, we're going to be discussing what will the financial world look like in 2030, which is a really hard thing to predict. And also, there's so much uncertainty right now in the markets. We have a tug of war going on now. The markets seem to be flat. And if you look at the S&P 500, it is up 7% for the last month and up 12% in the last year, roughly. So that's good. But if you look at the S&P 500 from the beginning of 22, not counting dividends, because maybe it wasn't totally flat, but basically it's essentially flat. So you could have been in the market for 2 years now and gotten no returns, depending on where you're investing. So it's a very uncertain times. And it wouldn't surprise me if the market is flat or even down a little bit towards the beginning until January, or maybe there'll be a year-end rally like there often is. But I think 2024 looks grim. And as I always say, the market is delusional about what's likely to happen because they're pricing in multiple rate cuts from the Fed, which I doubt is going to happen, and a soft landing, which I also doubt is going to happen. My prediction is probably one rate cut next year around a few months before the election to make the politicians happy. But maybe the beginning of a solid 1.5 year recession, give or take 6 months, maybe 2 years even. And why is that? Well, it's obvious. And it has been for 2 years now. First of all, the Fed is not doing too well with the fight against inflation. Everybody thought it would go away last year. On and on, the markets, are optimistic. Everything's going away. Everything's perfect. It hasn't worked out. And I don't think it will work out as well as some predict, because we are at it was one thing to bring the inflation down from 7.5% to 4%, because that was pretty excessive. But now to even get it to 2 or 3%, it's going to be a battle. And all the conditions say that it may go the other way, and it's going to be really hard to get it down. One, unemployment is still near record lows. There are over 9 million unfilled jobs in the United States. And that's 50-year record lows, by the way. So that's not an easy condition to say, okay, inflation is going away tomorrow, because people will keep spending if they have jobs, even if they're maybe burning through their credit cards or whatever, which is happening to a point. Number two, energy prices are probably going to rise next year. We have a long-term energy situation. And the quotes of the week and a few other things we'll get into this week point that out. And I'm always pointing that out because energy drives the economy, basically, along with the consumer. And then the U.S. government and the world governments around the world keep printing money. They just don't have any limit to how much they're printing now. The national debt is $33 trillion, as you can see. And it just goes up and up. They never pay it down, basically. It just goes up. But the real concern is the unfunded liabilities. But right now, even current liabilities are going up on the books because of wars, as everybody knows. So in more specific news, you can see the housing market just starting to turn. So sales are moving down because there's a tug of war between buyers and sellers basically now. But sales of U.S. Homes in October were the slowest in more than 13 years because of surging market rates. Home sales of existing homes were down 4.1%, and this was weaker than expected, and they've been falling for 5 months in a row. But home prices are actually still up year over year by 3.4%. So this is kind of the beginning of the turn. And this is just one sector, but a very important sector. So it'll affect realtors down the road, unfortunately for them, builders, people who are some construction workers, down the road when it finally is turning down, and it is month by month turning down. So that's the first sign that we're heading for slower times in the economy in the short to midterm. And the other thing is, and this is so obvious, Americans are struggling with inflation and what's happened. So along with food and so many other expenses, the cost for electricity, natural gas, and car insurance have climbed by at least 25% since the start of 2020. And I know it's not supposed to be political, but that was when President Biden was elected. So electricity has climbed 25% since January 2020. In California, which has really poor energy policies, among others. And I understand why they want to fight climate, but as a side note, but they're not doing it. They're making the climate much worse with the energy crisis. As a matter of fact, just today I heard we're now having the warmest year ever. Carbon is up year after year, US and worldwide. This is another whole show, but basically forcing production to polluting countries is not smart. Forcing people to use coal because there's not enough oil and gas, or forcing people to use oil because there's not enough natural gas is not a smart policy. So these are crazy policies. So in California, rates went up 59% since January 20. New York, another blue state with crazy energy policies. They won't put in gas pipelines. They won't allow fracking in natural gas, which is a lot better than oil and coal in terms of the environment and cost and everything else, up 38%. Natural gas is up in the United States, up 29%. Car insurance is actually up 33% since the start of 2020. So something has got to give. And the consumer, which drives a lot of the economy, is going to have to slow down. As I said, they're burning through savings, burning through credit cards, taking a little bit more out of IRAs now. But, you can't, that won't go on forever. So quotes of the week. And the 3 quotes of the week come from 3 international experts, all who were in Barron's Sunday magazine roundtable, and they were talking about internet investing in general. And they're from 3 different sources. I won't name them, but they were all things that I agree with. So the first, and I learned something, or two things actually from them. So the first one, expert said, the only asset negatively correlated to stocks and bonds is energy. Higher energy prices would dish more pain, triggering further selling of bonds, while the consequent higher interest rates would trip up equity markets. Today, not running a heavily overweight energy position is setting yourself up for a potentially disastrous outcome. Well, we've been huge on energy for 2 years. It's been the best sector in the whole economy. But what I learned was, I did not know that, I never looked at that, but so both equity and bonds are negatively correlated with energy, which makes sense since energy is a tax. So that's interesting. And it shows you the potential importance of having energy in your portfolio as part of a diversified portfolio. Number 2 quote, with so much focus on the energy transition and the cumulative level of underinvestment, the average age of producing resources has been cut in half over the past 15 years. So I've been saying for 2 years, over 2 years, even before the show, when I was a co-host of another show, that energy is a problem because companies are putting in less than half of what they used to put in since 2015. One company estimated 40% too little investment in capital, and you can't do that forever. But what I learned, and this is the first real evidence of it. So this analyst is saying that the world's producing resources, in other words, the reserves, are cut in half now. Now, how long can that go on? I don't know. Maybe it'll start hitting us this year, next year. The world keeps using more and more energy. I remember just maybe 2 years ago, we were using 99 million barrels a day. Now it's, I believe, 105 million a day. So we have increasing usage by developing countries, by most countries, and nobody wants to look for more reserves or spend money on building these projects that take 5 to 7 years. This is probably going to be an issue, maybe next year, sooner or later. Third quote relates to energy again, and it's, if oil prices rise to $120 a barrel and stay there for 2 quarters, that will kill the global expansion. If oil goes to $100, you can take a half a percent off the global growth. So again, nobody can forecast the exact price of oil, or you just buy futures or options. But the point is that sooner or later, this is going to catch up. You can't just keep draining the oil reserves and think you can go on forever. Solar and wind are not going to fill in the gap quick enough, considering the increased usage by developing countries. So 5 most interesting stories of the week. And there's some interesting stories. I had 2 weeks. I barely pick which ones were good. So number one, I don't know whether to say this is sad or comical or a bit of both, but so battered by waves of illegal immigrants, Customs and Border Protection officers at the borders now have a new burden. They must now be sure to use proper pronouns for LGBTQI plus immigrants. So their new guidance says that before they address an illegal immigrant, they have to find out the individual's self-identified pronouns. In other words, find out if they prefer to be called he, she, or they. So we don't have to worry about millions of illegal immigrants coming over the border, many terrorists, hundreds of terrorists crossing the border, an unknown huge amount of Chinese people who could be terrorists coming over the border, military-age men who might be spies or terrorists. We don't have to worry about illegal drugs. We don't have to worry about human trafficking. But the important thing is, at least we're going to get the preferred pronouns for illegal immigrants correct. So priorities. Number 2, another kind of thing about the federal government. So the federal government is finally cleaning up Robert Oppenheimer's mess on Staten Island. And it's taken them 80 years to do it. So a lot of people might wonder, well, there were tests, I believe it was New Mexico, the nuclear tests for the atomic bomb during World War II, and it was called the Manhattan Project. Well, why was it called Manhattan Project if they're doing the tests out there? Well, the project started in Manhattan, and they actually shipped a lot of uranium to Staten Island, where they kept it for a while before they moved it out. So this site is just 8 miles, by the way, from the southern tip of Manhattan, and has been kept secret for years, both during and after the war. There are apparently the uranium, the ore, was stored for 3 years in 2007 unmined metal drums and caused contamination on the land and in the warehouse, and they then demolished it in the 1940s. 80 years later, this radiation still poses a danger. Now, the Department of Energy knew about the site's radiation since 1980, and they've kept it under wraps as they squabbled over which department would handle the issue. And during that time, scores of homes within a stone's throw from the weed-covered, trash-strewn, toxic parcel were built while they're arguing about this. So it turned out that the Energy Department also rejected the site for federal remediation on a technicality. And this is why I'm skeptical of big government and why everybody should be. Government has its purpose, but limited small government is generally more reliable and let the private market handle most things. But government has its purpose. But I mean, how can you trust people like this? It's crazy. 80 years and they're just fixing it now. And look at the damage. It's incredible. Number 3 most interesting story. So Google is being sued by the Department of Justice for a landmark antitrust case. And people asked Google's AI site, let's say, or AI machine, Bard, about the antitrust case. So whether the Bard agreed or disagreed with the DOJ's arguments, the Department of Justice. And so the Bard sided with the feds, and it said that the U.S. prosecutor's evidence made it clear that Google, quote, illegally used its monopoly power to maintain its dominance in the online search engine, and also said, I believe that the Justice Department should prevail in this case. If Google is found to have violated antitrust laws, the court should order Google to change its business practices and make it easier for other search engines to compete. So I would think that the government might be bringing this up. Sorry about that. Hold on a second. I would think that the government might be using Bard's own site, AI, to prove their case. And I don't trust AI a lot, and it poses a lot of issues for humanity. But, AI doesn't mean it's right all the time. There are a lot of cases now coming up where AI put out false news and other issues because it thinks on its own, but that's not necessarily always correct. And hopefully people won't depend on it all the time. Number 4, interesting story. So life expectancy is falling for all Americans in the past few years, but apparently it's fallen much faster for men than for women. It's the largest gender gap in 20 years. As of 2021, women were outliving men by 5.8 years. And there's a lot of causes for that. One is men are disproportionately employed in hazardous jobs such as logging, roofers, construction workers, aircraft pilots, and steel workers. So that's one reason. 2, suicide rate and overdose rate is higher for men. Also, men are less likely to go to college or complete a degree. And in an increasingly service-oriented and knowledge-based economy, that translates to a worse life and worse career prospects for many men. So I doubt there's going to be any protests over men's worsening life prospects and compared to women, but the women's movement may be a little out of date now because it's the men that may be needing a movement soon. It depends on the issue. Again, there are still some issues that may need cleaning up, but women are getting way ahead of men in so many areas. But you wouldn't know that watching mainstream media or a lot of the mainstream thought. Finally, nutrition news, and this was very interesting to me. I followed a lot of things in nutrition, but another disclaimer, I'm not a doctor, so you have to decide for yourself what to do. The first non-financial disclaimer we ever gave. But apparently, or I will say first, vitamin D, I know, is one of the most common deficiencies in the world and the U.S. As a matter of fact, I didn't look it up, but I'm pretty sure more than half of Americans and other people in most places have vitamin D deficiencies. So there was just a study of 632 participants, and the study said that the needed dosages of vitamin D were 10 times higher than the current recommended dosage by the U.S. government. The dosage recommended is 600 IU. I personally suggest 4,000 IU. I came across that as a supplement. I came across that because I read some people believe over 4,000 IU is toxic over time, but a lot of people in the study needed up to 10,000 IU just to catch up for a while. So that's I think it's important. It's one of the few vitamins I take, and it's a very important vitamin. So we'll take a quick break, and then we'll be back with our news of the investment pick of the week and our panel discussion and more. We'll be right back.
One of the things that business owners forget a lot is to prepare for their own retirement.
Hi, my name's Nick Palavita, and today I'm with a very special guest, a certified financial planner, a chartered retirement plan specialist, and president of National Pension Partners, Max Couliet. Max, tell me what you do at National Pension Partners.
Well, Nick, we help successful small businesses and professionals put together retirement plans that provide them the maximum retirement benefits and big tax deductions at the same time.
Well, how do you do this?
Well, we get on an internet conferencing system with the client. We review their goals, what they want to accomplish, and then put together strategies to help them in implementing a retirement plan that benefits them, not everybody else.
Well, that sounds really good, but how much does this cost?
Well, it's really not bad because the first consultation is free. That allows us to go through and discover whether this strategy works for that business and for you as the business owner and helping you maximize your retirement.
Well, Max, how do we get this free appointment?
It's really pretty simple, Nick. You can either go to our website below or call us at 877-252-1692, and then we can set up a time with either myself, Nick, or one of our other retirement plan specialists, another CPA or advisor in the office to go over this with you and make sure it fits for you.
Hi, my name is Lewis Haupt. I work with National Pension Partners, and I work with businesses to allow them to put the maximum away that they can for themselves and to save taxes.
Hi, I'm Brad Coyle, and I'm the brokerage manager at National Pension Partners. We're always analyzing plan fund choices in order to ensure the participant's success.
If you want more information on how we can help you and your business put more money away in a retirement plan than you ever thought possible, contact us at the website below or call us at 877-252.
And we're back. So what to do, as always, you should invest in energy pipelines, especially. I love pipelines. Own dividend stocks. We've shown that chart over and over on the show before that dividend stocks outperform the S&P 500 by 2 to 3 times over a 50-year study up to 2022. So whatever stocks you want to own, besides owning energy, you want them to be dividend oriented either way. And the third thing is be cautious because it's a rocky time. So investment of the week. Disclaimers, entertainment only, show just our opinions, no guarantees, and consult your financial advisor. So the investment of the week is gold, and this is one nobody can be sure of for certain, but there's some interesting things about gold. I have about 1/3%, or maybe a little more in gold, just as a sort of almost to me speculative bet. Now, some people say you should definitely own 5 to 10% in gold. Warren Buffett hates gold. He's against it. Other people say own 0. Some people say put 100% in. Nobody really can predict that at all. But here's what I can tell you about gold and why I own just a little bit of it and not a lot more, because it's not necessarily a great hedge on inflation. Most people think, oh, I'm going to own gold because of inflation. Well, at sometimes gold has worked really well against inflation. In the 70s, it did phenomenally well. But at other times, many other times, it hasn't. Just as an example, in 2022, inflation, it was at 7, and gold went down. Why could it go down? Because if interest rates go up, the cost of holding gold goes down, and it's really about investor sentiment. So bottom line on gold is that, because I'm trying to hurry because we want to get the panel discussion, in a June 21st CNBC article that was published, it said the correlation of gold to inflation over 50 years, according to the study, was only 0.16%. So that's not a very good inflation hedge. It's almost random. And so you can own gold for various reasons, but I'm not so sure it's going to work as an inflation hedge for sure. And personally, I think oil is a better inflation hedge, although I have to look up the correlation with oil, but it has to be higher than that. I mean, oil is what drives inflation a lot of times, but gold, who knows where it'll be in the future. So I just own a little bit of it in case whatever, things collapse, maybe my 3% will help a little bit, but it's not enough really to make a difference. So let's get to the panel discussion of the week. And the question is, and this is a really hard one, as I cited the Yogi Berra quote, how do you predict 2030? Who knows? There's so many things that can happen, but we're going to take a crack at it. So question is, what will the financial world look like in 2030? Quick background, and then we'll open up the discussion. Number one, we live in such a fast and acceleratingly fast world. It's the fastest ever. You know, things used to happen very slowly, then medium. Now it's incredible how fast it is. We're in the information age, and things are just happening. Number two, there's a lot of things, enormous trends happening right now that are going to affect the economy and affect the world. There's no doubt about it. We hear about a lot of them every day, and other ones we don't hear quite much about, but mostly they're all there, and we're all aware of them, but nobody's looking, well, how's this going to be, what's going to happen in 7 years or even beyond that? One is AI. So McKinsey, to me, maybe the best consulting firm in the world, are up there, predicted 30% of all jobs could be threatened by AI by 2030. That's a phenomenal prediction. That's not so far off anyway, any longer. Number two, demographics. As everybody knows, pretty much countries around the world have very aging populations, which is very different than the historical norms. Three, debt. The U.S. and just about every country has growing debt on their books. U.S. states have debt on their books. Many corporations have debts on their books. And a lot of those debts relate to retirement liabilities, maybe healthcare liabilities. And those are just the funded debts. And then you have unfunded debt, which is staggering. I mean, it's staggering. It's unfathomable how much money the countries of the world, not just the U.S., the whole world, has an aging population that is, and many countries have promised totally free healthcare. So in a way, the U.S. is a little better off because it just promises mostly free healthcare. But all these liabilities for aging populations are unfunded. The money has been spent. So how much money is going to have to be printed for that? Inflation, we all know that right now the world's dealing with inflation, and nobody's sure how long that will occur. Energy, as we've discussed so many times, there's a very good chance that this underinvestment in energy is going to cause issues, at least for a few years, to 2030, who knows. But more energy is likely going to be needed to be drawn from the ocean than land over time, because there's not an unlimited amount of energy in land, and that's more expensive. So that drives up costs. Of course, there's geopolitical turmoil, hard to predict there. So there's an awful lot of issues, maybe more than ever, for the economy, for the finance. Nick, I only have a few conclusions because it's tough to make conclusions, but what do you think?
Well, Peter, it'll depend a lot on this election in 2024, what happens by 2030. Okay, but given the history of what we're looking at more inflation, higher debts, and also an economy where more of the wealthy people will have more of the money and more of the poor people will exist. Now, here's one of the serious real problems. It used to be you had to balance your budget, which means you had to increase taxes, which we saw in the 80s. Even under Reagan, he realized when he tried to reduce taxes, he couldn't do it, so he could balance the budget. He increased taxes, or you decrease spending, which also took place in the 80s. Now we have a new economy. We don't increase taxes, and we don't reduce our spending.
Right.
So what is the result? It's inflation. Mm-hmm. And we saw this in Venezuela. They're a poster child for this type of work. We are heading right in that direction because notice the U.S. government will not reduce their debt. They will not cut their huge amount of spending. As I've been going over the budget with David Walker, you wouldn't believe the amount of waste, fraud, and abuse that take place.
I know.
Okay. But they're not going to do it. Okay. So, and they're not going to increase taxes because the Republicans don't want tax increase. So what we're going to see, I believe, is huge inflation. So go to McDonald's, get $10,000 out to buy your hamburger. Okay, and I'm not kidding. It'll be numbers that you just haven't seen today. A McDonald's hamburger could cost $110 by 2030 because the only way out is to inflate the economy and watch. That's what's going to happen by 2030 because that's what we're doing, and that's what we.
Okay, so let me pick up on what you said. I agree with you to a good extent, but the thing is, people can't afford, and I'll argue against it to a point, but you're right. You're right on the track about the issues about inflation being that's going to be too high. But first of all, I don't think people can afford $10,000 hamburgers. And that's going to be why we're going to have, in my prediction, stagflation. Because what you're going to have is a slowing economy. People are going to say, people are not going to have the $10,000 for a burger. So now they're not going to buy the burger. So now it's going to cycle, and not just burgers, obviously. People won't have enough money for an increasing inflation. So my prediction is more like inflation at 3 or 4 year after year, but interest rates are going to probably come down, and growth in the economy is going to come down towards zero. Because basically, first of all, and this is one of my key predictions, which is almost certain, because only two things can happen with this staggering amount of money they're going to be printing. One, the governments are going to lose control, in which case you're right, we're going to have $10,000 hamburgers. But, because it's just going to be like Zimbabwe or, Venezuela, it's just, money won't be worth anything.
Argentina.
But right. But I meant to say Argentina, by the way. So good catch. So, but the other thing is, I think governments will be able to control this by what's called yield curve control. And what they're going to do is they're going to buy their own debt. And it's been done in Japan for over a decade. And it was done in the United States. And they basically buy their own debt. So it's like a bond, almost like circular. And they buy their own debt to bring interest rates down to zero. So they're going to help the economy in a sense, and companies to a little sense, by bringing down the interest rates. So, but the problem is, let's say we're at 0% interest rates, maybe negative interest rates have been in a lot of countries. It was in Europe for a time. And let's say we have 0 interest rates, or very low or negative, either one, but inflation's at 4. Well, first year, second year, third year, fourth year, how many more years of increased expenses can the consumer bear? So, and you add that up with AI, which is going to help companies a bit, but going to destroy consumers if it starts replacing jobs. Yeah, every time a company hires somebody, and saves some money, they're putting somebody out of a job who's not a consumer anymore. So, maybe they go to the government for income support, but that's not going to be the same salary. So that's going to hurt. Aging populations are always deflationary, because aging populations, people as they retire spend much less. They start using their assets. As they're saving for retirement, they save. Energy costs are going to be a tax. So unfortunately, I'll try to leave on a positive note, but unfortunately, I think we're looking for a very slow growing economy going forward. And you're right, the elections will matter. Who will be our leader? Maybe they can pull us out to a point. But I don't care if it's, whoever it is. These are such staggering conditions now. Nobody can dig us out. You can't dig us out of these kind of debt issues. So it's going to be tough, but hopefully we'll have good leadership, and that'll help a little bit. But to leave on a positive note, this is why it's so important to understand the macro and micro conditions that are out there when you're picking a company or an investment. Because if you've got the wrong macro condition, and hopefully we have the right one for our investment advice, then you can't pick the right company. If you get macro wrong, it's almost impossible. You have to know the right sectors, and you have to know where we're going, and how to plan for it. So it's very important for people who have assets or can plan any way to start planning for a future, which may have very low interest rates and slow growth, and unfortunately, too much inflation. So sorry to leave on the bad note. We're just the messengers, but we try not to ruin your day. What can you do, right? I mean, I wish we had better leadership. These issues, by the way, some of them have been around for 30 or 50 years, and they've known about it. But you keep kicking down the can. Well, you know what? You can't keep kicking down the can forever. And this is just reality. And now the can cannot be kicked many more years. I mean, we're getting to the point where these issues are going to hit. On energy, we've kicked the can down for 8 years. On Social Security, Medicare, and governments around the world, other governments not providing for future healthcare needs. They've kicked the can to here, but now you can't kick that many more years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. It's going to be issues that the governments are going to be forced to deal with. So thanks for watching Wall Street Hackers. Again, sorry about the bad news. If I try not to be too negative, but you can plan if you have any assets at all or any other plan, career planning, whatever you can do for this future. So it's important to see where we're going. We'll be back next week on Thursday or Saturday, depending on your distribution channel. And as Kim always says, get healthy, get wealthy. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.